you probably think you've got a pretty good handle on Japan.
Right.
Politically stable, maybe even a bit predictable.
Yeah, that's the common image.
Well, hold on, because a political earthquake just hit. We're seeing a really fascinating shift that you might not have seen coming.
Absolutely.
Today, we're doing a deep dive into Japan's recent election results, specifically the honestly astonishing rise of Sanseito.
Yeah, this nationalist party, they basically went from the fringes, like almost unknown, to a really significant force in Japan's upper house.
That's quite the story. So our mission for you today is to unpack what's really driving this sudden surge for Sanseito.
Right, we need to get into their Japanese first platform, what that actually means.
And figure out what these big gains signal for Japan's politics.
And maybe even, what it tells us about broader global trends. We've pulled together a lot of material, election analysis, voter polls, expert commentary.
Yeah, lots of the sources to help us connect the dots and give you that shortcut to really understanding what's happening here.
Okay, so let's dig in. Picture this. Sanseito, founded just, 3 years ago?
March 2020, right in the pandemic.
Exactly. And they had just one single seat in the upper house out of 248, one.
Barely a blip on the radar.
And then, boom, this election, 14 seats.
14, that's not just a gain, that's an explosion onto the scene.
It really is. How does a party go from basically zero to, a major player that quickly, especially in Japan's system?
What's fascinating, and you touched on it, is how they sort of used the pandemic, that global crisis, to build their initial base.
Yeah, founded right at the start. People were looking for answers, maybe alternative explanations for things.
And they jumped onto YouTube, didn't they?
Yeah.
Spreading conspiracy theories about vaccines, anti-mask stuff.
That's right. A very digital-first strategy. It helped them build this maybe niche at first, but dedicated following away from the mainstream media.
And that online energy translated into their first actual seat in 2022.
Campaigning as this anti-globalist party. Their supporters were talking about, a cabal of globalists and financial institutions working against regular people.
That kind of rhetoric.
Yeah, tapping into that feeling of being left behind or manipulated. But then, crucially, they pivoted. They broadened their message beyond just the pandemic stuff.
Okay, so that brings us to the big question. What is this Japanese first policy that suddenly got them so much traction? From 1 seat to 14.
Well, at its core, it's a strongly nationalist agenda. They explicitly warn about a, quote, silent invasion of foreigners.
Strong language.
Very. But they didn't just rely on that. They also tacked on some populist promises, things that hit home economically.
Like cutting the consumption tax.
Yeah.
And boosting child benefits.
Exactly. Things that appeal directly to voters who are, feeling the pinch in the current economy.
But it seems like it's not just the policies on paper, right? There's a personality driving this, too.
Oh, definitely. You have to look at the leader, Sohei Kamiya. He's 47.
And his background is interesting, too. He used to be in the LDP, the ruling party.
Yeah, a former member. He actually ran back in 2012, even had Shinzo Abe's support, but lost.
Wow, okay.
And he was also a self-defense force reservist. That plays well with a certain conservative group.
And he's been pretty open about who inspires him politically.
Right. He's directly credited former U.S. President Donald Trump for shaping his, as he puts it, bold political style.
Okay, so here's where it gets, potentially more controversial. Comparing himself to Trump, making these really bold claims about globalists, Japan becoming a colony.
Yeah, it gets attention.
For sure. And our sources mention his remarks on the campaign trail were often inflammatory and controversial.
And it wasn't accidental. It was apparently part of a very well-coordinated campaign using social media to spread these messages.
We even have that quote from him at a rally. Under globalism, multinational companies have changed Japan's policies. If we fail to resist this foreign pressure, Japan will become a colony.
That's incredibly charged language.
So what does that kind of aggressive talk tell us about how they're actually getting voters on board? Mobilizing them.
Well, if you look at modern politics, Kamiya's style direct, confrontational, combined with their smart use of social media, it's a powerful mix.
They're tapping into something.
Exactly. A specific kind of frustration that maybe wasn't addressed elsewhere. Like, remember the backlash he got for calling gender equality policies a mistake?
Oh yeah, arguing it stops women having kids.
Right. And he claimed his hot-blooded style appeals particularly to men. But the exit polls, they tell a slightly more complex story.
So it wasn't just men.
No, support came from across the working population, mostly 20 to 50-year-olds. There was a bit of a male slant, sure, but not disproportionately so, as one analysis put it.
So their promises, the economic ones and the nationalism, they pulled in young conservatives online, away from the LDP.
Precisely, they're cutting into the LDP's traditional base, which leads us to the really crucial question, why now? What's going on in Japan that makes this message hit home so hard right now?
Yeah, it feels like it's not just about Sanseito's appeal, is it? It's also about maybe dissatisfaction with the status quo, with the LDP.
That seems to be a huge part of it.
Voters seem frustrated with the current LDP leader, Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba. He's struggled to inspire confidence, hasn't he?
He really has. And Japan's facing real economic challenges. There's the cost of living crisis biting hard.
And those tricky trade talks with the U.S. causing uncertainty.
So you have this backdrop of economic anxiety.
It sounds like classic political dissatisfaction, just boiling over. We see that elsewhere, too.
It does raise that big question about voter trust, doesn't it? And disillusionment, not just in Japan, but in lots of established democracies.
So experts are seeing this.
Yeah, Jeffrey Hall over at Kanda University, he studies Japanese politics. He pointed out it's not just a random protest vote.
What does he say?
He said these more right-wing parties are actively pulling conservative voters away from the LDP. Apparently, a lot of Shinzo Abe's old supporters think Prime Minister Ishiba just isn't conservative enough.
Not enough like Abe, lacking the strong views on history or against China.
Exactly. That's the feeling Hall described. And Rintaro Nishimura from the Asia Group, he gave a specific example.
Which one?
The LDP passing that bill to promote LGBTQ awareness. For some conservative voters, that was a sign the party was moving away from its roots.
So voters are using Sanseito and other opposition parties, too, to basically send a message.
Pretty much. To vent their frustrations, as Nishimura put it. To show the LDP, hey, you'll pay a price if you abandon the conservative ideals we value.
And it wasn't just Sanseito that gained ground, right?
No, that's important. The center-right Democratic Party for People also jumped, from 5 seats to 16.
Wow, another big leap.
Yeah, it reinforces this idea that people are just, quote, sick of the status quo establishment politics.
So the economic problems, the feeling the LDP shifted, it created a kind of opening.
A vacuum, exactly. And Sanseito stepped right into it. But let's focus on that issue they really hammered home, immigration.
Right, the silent invasion rhetoric.
Yeah. Now, what's fascinating is the gap between the numbers and the perception. Let's look at the facts.
Okay.
The number of foreign residents did hit a record, 3.8 million at the end of 2024. That's up about 10.5% from the year before.
Okay, so there is an increase.
There is. But, and this is the key point, that's still only 3% of Japan's total population. 3%.
That's tiny, isn't it?
Yeah.
Especially compared to many other developed countries.
Absolutely. And at the same time, tourism also hit a record high, about 36.9 million visitors last year.
So you have more residents, way more tourists.
Yeah.
How does that 3% figure get spun into a feeling of being overwhelmed?
Well, that's where the politics comes in. Sanseito really seized on that general unease. They blamed the LDP directly for policies letting more foreigners in.
And Jeffrey Hall, the expert we mentioned, he connected this to the economy again.
Yeah, he said anti-immigration talk often gets louder when the economy is weak. People look for someone to blame.
Makes sense.
And he also mentioned, misbehavior and bad manners by some tourists. Not all, obviously, but enough incidents to add, quote, fuel to the fire.
Creating this impression of a big foreign problem, even if the scale is different in reality.
Right. Hall said Sanseito tapped into that frustration and the perhaps unwarranted feeling that immigrants were rising too much in number.
So you have this history of Japan being traditionally wary of immigration.
Deeply wary. Yeah. Valuing homogeneity.
But now they need workers because the population is aging so fast. So the government eased the laws.
Exactly, out of necessity. But it created this tension. Some Japanese people got frustrated, blaming foreigners for crime, inflation, whatever, whether it's factually accurate or not.
And the government tried to respond just before the election.
They did. They set up a new committee, promised to work towards a society of orderly and harmonious coexistence.
But too little, too late maybe, for the election outcome.
It seems that way, based on the results. Which really brings us squarely to the implications. What does Sanseito's rise actually mean for Japan going forward?
Right. Is this the start of something bigger? Jeffrey Hall seems to think so. He said this result proves the possibility of a populist right in Japan.
Suggesting it's probably here to stay.
And Kamiya himself, the leader, he's already talking big, isn't he? vowing to get 50 or 60 seats next time so their policies become reality?
Yeah, though he did sort of walk it back a bit after the election, clarifying his policy wasn't about completely banning foreigners, maybe trying to sound a little more mainstream.
Perhaps. But still, it raises that question about how viable these kinds of populist movements are long-term, especially in a place like Japan.
Because despite the big gains, they still don't have enough seats to, say, submit budget bills on their own in the upper house.
And they only have 3 seats in the lower house, which is more powerful.
Exactly. So their actual legislative power right now is pretty limited.
And Rintaro Nishimura, the other analyst, he offered a counterpoint, didn't he? About the voters.
Yeah, a really important one. He said it's been notoriously hard for populist parties to really stick around in Japanese politics. Why? Because of a fickle electorate.
Fickle, meaning they switch loyalties easily.
That's the idea. His point was, if voters support a party like Sanseito and then feel like it's not delivering or not living up to expectations,
They'll just go back to the established parties like the LDP
Right.
or look for the next new thing.
Exactly. So while this election definitely signals a potential shift, a possibility for a durable populist right, Japanese voting history suggests maybe we should be cautious about calling it a permanent transformation just yet.
So it's not necessarily a done deal then. They made a huge splash, no doubt.
Oh, absolutely.
But they aren't powerful enough yet to really dictate policy on their own. And those voters who boosted them, they might just drift away again.
It's possible.
It really does feel like a political experiment happening in real time, testing how this new force fits or if it's just a temporary expression of unhappiness.
The road ahead for Sanseito, and really for Japan's whole political direction, it's definitely going to be fascinating to watch.
Yeah. Hopefully this deep dive gives you a much richer, more nuanced picture of what's happening right now in Japan.
We've covered a lot: Sanseito's sudden rise, their Japanese first ideas, the voter frustrations with the establishment.
And that whole complex situation around immigration and tourism numbers versus perception.
What really stands out, I think, is how you have to look beyond just the headlines, you know?
Definitely. You need to understand the economic worries, the cultural feelings, the specific history of the place to really get what's driving these shifts.
Right. And maybe here's a final thought for you to chew on, something that goes beyond just Japan.
Okay.
Think about these dynamics we've discussed: the economic stress, the immigration anxiety, a charismatic leader using populist language, a feeling that the old established parties have shifted.
Sounds familiar in other places too.
Exactly. How much does that echo political movements you're seeing elsewhere in the world, despite all the local specifics in Japan?
Yeah. What does that tell us about maybe broader global trends in how voters are feeling?
And maybe, what could it mean for the future of democracy globally? Something to mull over.